arrived by boat on the coast of Kourou. They were carefully transferred to Europe's spaceport in large containers. These elements were then assembled in a dedicated building. Here we see the main core being placed into a vertical position, standing 31 meters high. The two solid boosters were attached to either side of the main stage. This was followed by the upper cryogenic stage, hoisted into the air and lowered onto the main stage. The whole assembly was then moved to the so-called final assembly building. JUICE arrived last February by plane in Cayenne, the main city of French Guiana. It then traveled an additional 50 kilometers to the spaceport for preparation. There, the spacecraft was removed from its container and carefully inspected in clean room facilities. JUICE was then integrated onto the launch adapter before it was fueled, bringing its weight to just over 6 tons. The spacecraft was transferred to the final assembly building and mated on top of Ariane 5, some 35 meters above the ground. Launch preparation team got their last glimpse of the spacecraft as it was encapsulated inside the fairing, which has kept it safe and sound until today. On Tuesday, Ariane 5, with JUICE on top, was rolled out to the launch pad, where today it waits, poised in anticipation for its ascent into the sky.
So, our passenger is sitting safe and sound tucked under the fairing, as you can see, waiting for liftoff in just over 2 minutes.
Raphael have moved to the skybox overlooking the Jupiter control room, where, as you can imagine, everyone is intensely focused on the last couple of minutes to lift off. And we can see here, as I was telling you, the crowds that were sitting in Jupiter control have now been asked to go out to the terraces on either side of the control room. They are among the lucky... Oh, so I didn't realize you could actually see us. We're sitting here in our skybox. So they're out on the terraces. And they will be the lucky ones who'll be able to see and also feel that launch, because trust me, you feel it. What are we going to see in the last few seconds before liftoff, Raphael?
Well, everything is going to happen quite quickly. So, like I said, the electrical power supplies switch from ground to board. The cryogenic arms, which are feeding the upper stage with fuel, we'll see them retract 6 seconds before liftoff. The Vulcan engine will ignite first. We need to check it's working properly before we switch on the boosters. That's going to happen 7 seconds later. So don't be surprised if you don't see anything during these 7 seconds, because believe me, you will see and you will hear the launch.
And you'll be hearing every milestone being called out by the DDO. He is the Range Operations Manager, and his role is in an... Oh, we'll wait for the 1 minute mark. Raphael.
À tous de DDO, attention pour moins 1 minute. Top, H0, moins 1 minute.
Right, so from here on, no more commentary from us. Don't be surprised if it doesn't take off immediately, because of course there are those 7 seconds, Raphael.
Exactly, so just enjoy the launch.
During which the Vulcan engines are set on, and then the launcher takes off.
Go Ariane 5.
Go Ariane 5. Enjoy.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage Vulcain. Allumage EAP, décollage. La propulsion est nominale. La propulsion est nominale.
And there we go. We've seen the Ariane 5 lift off, roaring through the tropical sky, carrying Juice on the first leg of her journey into space. And now she has disappeared under the clouds. And see there, in Kourou, there are many places from which to watch these launches. As you can see, the beach, any place. And here we have a glimpse again of the rocket. Raphael, it's an amazing sensation for you as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, even with the clouds, it's just...
La trajectoire est nominale, tous les paramètres bord sont nominaux.
It's really, really always impressive, and it's an emotion to see it. So the DDO said that the trajectory is nominal, which means that it's working perfectly, it's going as planned.
La propulsion est nominale, le pilotage est calme.
And in fact, just to sum up what the DDO does in 3 words, his responsibility, he's the person who calls out every milestone along the way, and he's in charge of providing information on propulsion, guidance, and trajectory.
Exactly, he's like an orchestra conductor, gathering all the informations and summarizing it in real time, and soon we'll have booster separation.
We're waiting for confirmation from the DDO.
Séparation des EAP.
So the boosters have been safely separated. This is great. They have provided 90% of the overall thrust of the flight, so they're doing the main job. And then soon we'll have the separation of the fairing. And by the way, you see a special drawing on the fairing right here. Children around the world were asked to submit artwork
La trajectoire est nominale.
inspired by Juice's epic journey, and on this fairing, we see one child's interpretation of Jupiter embracing our spacecraft. Everything is nominal.
Tous les paramètres bord sont nominaux.
All parameters are going smoothly.
And there we have it. We've seen it in our 3D
Séparation preuve
animation,
confirmée.
and we've just heard it from the DDO.
Confirmed. So the fairing was used to protect the satellites from the friction of the air, but also from the noise generated during the ascent phase. We obviously need to safely separate the fairing, otherwise we would not be able to release Juice into space.
La propulsion est nominale.
It also means that we have crossed the limit of the atmosphere. So Juice is on its way to be separated in about 24 minutes from now. So by the way, we will have so the separation of the cryogenic stage when it has placed the launcher on an intermediate orbit. After this, I can mention that during, and we can actually see it on the motion design, because this is 3D animations here, that during the ascent phase, the launcher is set in what we call a barbecue mode. So it's slightly rotating on itself at a speed of 0.7 degrees per
Le
second.
pilotage est calme, la propulsion est nominale.
So we do this so that every face of the satellite is equally exposed to the sunlight. We just want to avoid overheating in one particular side of the spacecraft, which could damage the instruments. And as a matter of fact, when the upper stage is going to be injected on the targeted orbit, it will also rotate at a speed of 0.5 degrees in one direction and then at the same speed in the other direction. Again, to avoid overheating on one part of the spacecraft, exactly like, a barbecue.
Exactly. And of course, there are the onboard computers. What are they measuring right now, Raphaël?
Well, they optimize the
La
trajectory
propulsion est nominale, le pilotage est calme.
Everything is nominal, so they optimize the trajectory in real time. They minimize the propellant consumptions to bring the launcher to the intermediate orbit, targeted at the end of the main stage propulsion phase. And as a matter of fact, we are accelerating a lot right now. So within the next 3 to 4 minutes, we'll go from, 3.5 kilometers per second to more than 7 kilometers per second.
So how much is that per hour? Because you're the engineer.
25,000 kilometers per hour. And ultimately, juice will be separated at a speed of almost 10 kilometers per second. And it will be separated at an altitude of 1,533 kilometers.
Very precise. Okay. So the next milestone we are now waiting for, and we'll be hearing this again from the DDO, is the acquisition by our downrange station of Natal. That is located in on an island in the middle of the Atlantic. I'll just wait and hear that from the DDO. He may not have confirmed it orally, but by now it is.
Just to explain, all along the route eastwards, Ariane is tracked from the ground. So the launcher's functions and vital signs are recorded and sent back to a network of stations that keeps constant watch on the health of the launcher systems.
Par la station télémesure de Natal.
And we have
it. And
the confirmation that the first...
Apologies, of course, I did not mean Ascension. I meant Natal, over the border in Brazil, of course. That's the second downrange station.
And just so you know, in all, that's about 1,500 parameters that is collected.
Collected, my goodness. So there's no way these 1,500 parameters can be analyzed in real time, Raphaël. What happens to them?
Well, the complete analysis is carried out in the weeks following the launch by a dedicated team. They provide a wealth of information about how the vehicle performed during its mission. And so this is why we constantly, improve our knowledge of a launcher, launch after launch. And then that's why Ariane 5 is such a reliable launcher.
And so you were talking about the stations, and it's a little bit, you were saying to me earlier when we were chatting, it's like a relay race, these stations, isn't it? These downrange.
Yeah.
You were listening to the DDO. What did he say? I didn't hear him.
He said that all the parameters are working perfectly.
Nominal, that's what we like to hear.
So the flight is perfectly smooth. So yeah, this is like a relay race with one telemetry station passing the baton to the next one, because we want to keep full visibility of the launcher in all dynamic phases of the flight. So the first stations to pick up the data was Galileo, right here in Kourou, followed by Natal in Brazil, then the island of Ascension in the middle of the Atlantic, and followed by Libreville in Gabon, and finally Malindi in Kenya.
As the launcher crosses
Trajectoire nominale, tout paramètres nominaux.
So we'll have 3 different, very short sequences right now.
Coming up.
The cutoff of the main stage.
We should hear that.
The jettison of the main stage. And then the ignition of the upper stage. So it should be confirmed.
Extinction Vulcain. Séparation EPC.
And the ignition coming up.
Yep. Waiting for the
Allumage ESC confirmé.
That's a very good news. That's a very important step.
You should see the smile on Raphael's face. You can't, because we're in our little booth. Because we forgot to mention that we are now in the sky booth, where we have a fantastic view over Jupiter, where we can see the crowds gathered. And yes, and so you cannot see the smile on Raphael's face, but he is delighted that this stage has gone perfectly.
Yeah, the ignition of upper stage is absolutely key, because it's always quite a little bit tricky to ignite a liquid stage in the emptiness of space. I told you that on the ground we wait for a few seconds to check that the Vulcan engine is correctly ignited
Fin de visibilité par la station de Galio.
before liftoff. But in space, it's just not possible to do that. You cannot send somebody to repair the engine. Also in zero gravity, the propellant is floating in all
Le pilotage
directions.
est calme.
The thermal environment is also not the same as it is on the ground. So, there are many factors that make it quite
Trajectoire
challenging
nominale, tout paramètre bord nominaux.
and complex to ignite the engine in space.
So we were mentioning earlier, this is the penultimate Ariane 5 launch, which for more than a quarter of a century has provided Europe with reliable and independent access to space, which Josef Aschbacher was talking about earlier. Ariane 6 will be taking over. Europe's best engineers are building on the success of Ariane 5, and there's already a fully integrated Ariane 6 on the launch pad right here in Kourou. You're going to tell us about that, Raphael. So can you take us through the latest developments
Absolutely.
with Ariane 6?
So last year was quite exciting for Ariane 6 with the start of what we call the combined test, corresponding to the meeting between the launcher and the launch pad here
La
in
trajectoire est
Europe
nominale, tous les
Spaceport.
paramètres bord sont nominaux.
Here we see a fully representative version of Ariane 6, which has been assembled with the main core raised vertically, directed on the launch pad. The upper composite was then hoisted and mated on top of the launcher. This operational scheme is actually a big difference with respect to what is done with Ariane 5. It is made possible thanks to this mobile gantry, which will obviously be removed during launch. And also, 2023 is going to be also a busy year for Ariane 6, obviously. In January, the launcher was connected to the control bench, and a first power test was performed. Then dry run will be performed, followed by the actual fueling operations of the central
La
core.
trajectoire est nominale, tous les paramètres bord sont nominaux.
Teams will also perform hot firing tests of the lower stage engine, Vulcan 2.1, including a long firing test. And hot firing tests of the upper stage were successfully performed in 2022 and beginning of 2023 in Lampershausen at the German Aerospace Center. Next ones
Propulsion
are
nominale,
under
pilotage
preparation.
calme.
So launcher elements that will be used for the Ariane 6 first flight will arrive in French Guiana using the new generation canopy vessel, which will be equipped with sails and hybrid
La
propulsion,
trajectoire est nominale, tous les paramètres à bord sont nominaux.
so that we can start the first real launch campaign of Ariane 6. And so today, the prototype of Ariane 6, stands on the launch pad, ready to continue the combined test. So good luck for this very ambitious and incredible program.
And Raphael, we heard while you were explaining all of this, we heard that the DDO
Perte
called out a loss
provisoire
of
de la
signal with the
télémesure
Natal tracking station.
suite à
Now,
la fin d'acquisition par la station de Natal.
there we go. And we didn't hear that it hadn't been picked up by the next station. Is that normal?
This is perfectly normal to have short visibility holes during non-dynamic phases of the launch. In this case, we have no visibility for just 63 seconds before the Ascension ground station picks the signal back. So this should come in any seconds now.
Acquisition de la télémesure par la station d'Ascension.
Your timing is perfect.
Confirmed.
So we've been picked up by the next downrange station, that is Ascension, the tiny little island in
La
the
trajectoire est
South
nominale,
Atlantic,
tous les
and
paramètres à
everything
bord
is
sont nominaux.
nominal, the DDO is telling us. So from what I understand, we're going back to Ariane 6, there's a very healthy order book already for Ariane 6 launches, Raphael.
Yeah, Ariane 6 is already quite successful on the market, with already 28 launchers sold for both institutional and commercial customers. It is a very versatile, flexible launcher, perfectly suited for complex missions and satellite constellations deployment thanks to its high lift-off capability and its reignitable upper stage engine.
La trajectoire est nominale, tous les paramètres bord sont
There we
nominaux.
go. It's nice to hear the regular updates from the DDO that everything is going to plan. For those of you who are joining us, Ariane 5 lifted off 14 minutes ago, just over 14 minutes ago, from the European spaceport here in French Guiana, carrying ESA's Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer into outer space. We're bringing you this live show from the Jupiter control room, where the operational teams are overseeing the mission's progress. JUICE is due to separate in about 13 minutes' time, but this is just the start of its long journey on its way to Jupiter. Let's find out more about the tech on board that will help it fulfill its mission.
La propulsion est nominale, le pilotage est calme.
At the heart of the JUICE mission led by ESA is a giant bird-like spacecraft with large solar panel wings stretching out on either side of its main body. With a mass of 6,100 kilos at launch, JUICE is a heavy spacecraft carrying 10 high-precision instruments, including the most powerful remote sensing, geophysical and in-situ payloads ever flown to the outer solar system.
Building a spacecraft which has to fly around Jupiter is a challenge. To operate a spacecraft you need energy, you need power. And normally we get power from the sun, using solar array. But around Jupiter there is not much sun. Therefore, the solar array has to be very big. There is also another challenge. All the stuff that we built there has to survive very low temperature. And the third one is that the environment around Jupiter is very radioactive. That's why I think the solar array, which is very exposed and put together these three difficult technologies, is really a great piece of engineering. Maybe a piece of art.
The instruments were contributed by the JUICE mission's scientific partner. The spacecraft was developed and built by Airbus, and Ariane Group's Savoir-Faire equipped JUICE with the chemical propulsion system that will drive it to Jupiter and its icy moons on an 8-year cruise.
We will provide the propulsion system for JUICE, which ensures that after leaving the launcher, it arrives correctly at Jupiter's moon and can work properly there. It's a fascinating thing, especially because the technical requirements of such a long journey, with so many constraints to consider, challenge each of us in a unique way.
Engineers have devised advanced technological solutions so that JUICE can operate in extreme environments, face Jupiter's high radiation belt, the long distance and harsh temperatures. Its 2.5-meter diameter antenna will send the data JUICE collects back to mission control, although it can take close to an hour to travel to Earth. The European mission JUICE is going to be a real revolution. Its collection of valuable data will be used by scientists for years to come and help unlock some of the greatest mysteries of the universe.
So, Raphael, JUICE is an emblematic European science mission. So what is it about this particular mission that inspires you as a rocket scientist?
Well, dream. And dream has always been a very strong driving force.
Acquisition par la station télémesure de Libreville.
For me, but also for, I think, everybody who works in the space industry. And, if we go on a more personal note, actually, before working at Ariane Space, many years ago already in my life as a space writer, I remember that one of my first real articles I wrote was about Jupiter's icy moon and the preparation of the JUICE mission with a focus on the moon Europa. And you can imagine that I would have never thought back then that I would be here standing at Kourou Spaceport in the Jupiter room to comment on its deployment into space. And I think I'm not mistaken when I say that all my colleagues are inspired by such emblematic mission. It really gives us an extra boost each time.
And especially when it comes to a mission aimed at looking for signs of life, that is just something else. It's difficult to actually fathom.
Can you, I mean, yeah, the ambition of JUICE, and it's a very complex mission, by the way.
La propulsion est nominale, le pilotage est calme.
So everything is nominal, but thinking that one probe is going to be around the moons of Jupiter, which are unexplored worlds with oceans of liquid water under the ice surface.
La trajectoire est nominale, tous les paramètres bord sont nominaux.
Where exobiologists expect to find some forms of life. We don't know, like microbes, maybe shrimps, maybe small fish. Probably not, but let's dream. And especially on the moon of Europa, it's just absolutely incredible.
Indeed, Raphael, hundreds of professionals in Europe are working on this crucial mission. We met some of them earlier. And as we know, it takes a whole family to put such an expedition together. So let's hear from some of the partners of this mission.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Victoire de Maincourt, je suis de nationalité française, je viens de Toulouse, je travaille chez Ariane Espace.
My name is Rossella and I originally come from Italy.
My name is Oliver Troll and I'm a German rocket engineer working for Ariane Group in Bremen.
I'm Italian and I'm a telecommunication engineer.
Je suis espagnol, je viens de la ville de Madrid et ça fait 3 ans que je travaille au Centre spatial guyanais.
Je suis chargée du suivi en temps réel du lanceur et de la mission et de vérifier son bon déroulement afin de rassurer à la fois les personnes qui travaillent sur le lanceur et évidemment le client.
In Kourou, during the launch campaign of JUICE, our goal is to check all the final full functional tests, so all the final checks after the transport of the satellite here in Kourou and before the launch.
I'm responsible for the follow-up of the stage integration up to the launch, the treatment of technical anomalies with an end-to-end view, the technical consistency of all information, and the on-site presence in Kourou during launch campaigns.
Je travaille à la sauvegarde vol. Mon rôle le jour J consiste à surveiller la trajectoire du lanceur et les équipements à bord. Et si on constate que la mission cesse d'être nominale, on pourrait être amené à intervenir pour assurer que tout se passe en sécurité pour les viandes et les personnes et ainsi maîtriser les risques.
I take care of the assembly and integration of all the units of the spacecraft and afterwards to make sure that the test campaign goes as planned and that the spacecraft will perform as expected once in space.
If I want to define team spirit in 3 keywords, I can say the first one is collaboration, the second keyword is coordination, and then the third keyword, which is the most important for me, is to have fun. It helps overcoming difficulties and obstacles. So yeah, for me this is the most important part.
So we are coming up to 22 minutes after liftoff, which means that in just over 5 minutes, JUICE will be separating from the mothership and starting its own life in space. Raphael, can you give us an update on where we're at right now?
So everything is working perfectly.
Acquisition par la station télémesure de Malindi.
So we have the Malindi telemetry station acquisition. So in the past 5 minutes, we went from 190 kilometers to more than 500 kilometers of altitude. So it now has a speed of 9.6 kilometers per second, which is absolutely gigantic. It is almost the speed at which JUICE will be separated into space. During the next 5 minutes, we'll increase altitude even faster. We'll gain an additional 1,000 kilometers in altitude. And by the way, the weight of our structure right now is 14 tons about. Only 2% of the initial mass of the Ariane 5 when it was on the ground.
That is just unbelievable, 2%. Ariane 5 typically launches geostationary transfer orbit launches. So here we're sending JUICE obviously much, much farther on an escape orbit. How is this different? How does it differ, for example, from launching a telecom satellite, which are many of the satellites that are launched with Ariane 5?
Well, the energy to provide to the spacecraft by the launcher is higher. It needs to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. Also for geostationary launches, we usually have a launch window of typically 30 minutes to 1 hour and a half, let's say, during which we can try and launch. And today's mission is sort of a rendezvous mission. And there was no launch window. It was what we call an instant launch. So we had to launch an exact time. So this is why everything has to go smoothly, even the weather before launching. Also, geo launches to the geostationary orbit usually happen in the evening. Today we launched in the morning, meaning that the team have been working all night during the final countdown. And also, we had to slightly adapt the filling of the tanks of the upper stage with cryogenic propellant, as the launcher was exposed to the sun since early morning, 6 a.m. So the sun heats and increases the pressure of the tanks, so we had to slightly underload it by 120 tons.
Which is
kilos, sorry.
So how is it this mission in itself different in terms of preparation?
Well, we need to take extra care in terms of cleanliness, because before leaving the Earth, we want to know exactly what kind of biological material JUICE takes with it. In French Guiana, there were several institutes which took samples from JUICE in the various satellite preparation rooms. Of course, most of the microbes will be sterilized in space, watched out by space radiations, but some can survive. Here we see on the image His Majesty the King of Belgium and His Royal Highness Prince Gabriel, who...
And they are here as VIP guests because Belgium has contributed rather importantly towards preparations for JUICE. So we were talking about, we were looking at the difference in preparation, weren't we?
The second main difference is that, you know, JUICE will perform very precise magnetic field measurements around Ganymede, the moon of Jupiter. And we had to measure many times the magnetic environment of JUICE during the launch campaign on the ground to make sure that in space it will measure only the magnetic environment of Ganymede and not its own magnetic field.
Because it has a very, very strong magnetic field, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, and so in a nutshell, looking at the time, we actually have, I haven't heard it from the DDO, did you?
So right now, we are in the stage where the upper stage is performing slight orientation maneuvers to separate the spacecraft in a very specific direction. It's important to do so on time in a very precise way, as it will really drive the satellite injection accuracy and have an impact on the rest of the spacecraft's lifetime in space. Just to give you an idea,
manœuvre d'orientation au profit de JUICE se poursuit de manière nominale.
Trajectory correction maneuver. And so the better the injection precision, the less important the maneuver is going to be, meaning that JUICE will be able to save its precious fuel for the rest of the mission.
And Raphael, we are 30 seconds away from separation. What are we going to see exactly? And then we'll stop the commentary and wait for the moment. In a nutshell?
Well, let me remind you that this is 3D animation here, but the teams are receiving signals and information in real time, and it is them who will confirm the separation of JUICE on its liberation orbit. They will provide all necessary information to ESA teams so that they can acquire the spacecraft.
Let's wait for confirmation from the DDO.
Séparation JUICE confirmée.
And this has been confirmed that the spacecraft is safely separated on its targeted orbit. And you can see on the images the relief from the teams.
This is years and years of work on the part of these teams.
Decades of work for some teams.
Yes. And it is so good to see such joy on their faces.
No, but
of
look
course,
at this.
A reminder that this is the very, very first leg of JUICE's journey.